Hello Internet, it's Linthus. In this video, I would like to take a look at Danger Close Season 2 for Counterside Global. So first we'll take an overview of both bosses, and we will discuss some decision making on who to put on which boss and which ships to use, etc. And then we'll go into each boss. If you're looking for an overview of what Danger Close is, the actual mode itself, I recommend going back on one of my videos on the Season 1 Danger Close. And that's it. Without further ado, let's get into it. So for this season, we are up against Moderator Type B and Tyrant Sword. Mod B is a Ranger type boss, and it's very similar to the Moderator Type A fight. Tyrant Sword is a striker boss. We actually have Tyrant Sword on the C server as well, which is kinda weird. So both bosses have high evasion. Fortunately, most people would have Enterprise, and Enterprise's skill 1 decreases evasion. So this is one of the decisions you'll have to make. Which boss gets Enterprise? For me personally, I went with Enterprise going to Tyrant Sword. That's because the ultimate of Enterprise also reduces attack, and Tyrant Sword has really high attack. As for general tips on units to use, Strikers are really good at Mod B. They have roll advantage there. So both the tanky Strikers and the damage dealer Strikers are usable there. And as for Tyrant Sword, snipers have roll advantage against him. So snipers are sort of the core of your DPS there, aka Shaolin. If you also have Karen Wong, she's also really good there because there are air minions that you need to take care of. And finally, we have Ju Shiyun. His counterattack is needed for Tyrant Sword. So, Mod B. As I said, it's a Ranger boss that is very similar to Mod A. Like Mod A, it also checks in front of him, but the check is less significant because the area which Mod B checks is way bigger, so you don't really have to think about it as much. On special skill activation, Mod B will check in a certain area, and if it sees 3 or more units, it spawns mines on the furthest unit. The mines leave behind this green mist, which does damage over time. It does like HP % damage over time. When the timer is a little bit above 2 minutes 10 seconds, it will initiate a DPS check like Mod A. And I suggest you save your ultimates and your ship skills for this. Mod B will then walk to the center of the stage. Once she's at the center, you will need some sort of tank in front of it so that it doesn't directly attack your ship. Then around this time, it will also initiate its ultimate, which is a barrage of lasers. It damages the entire field and also leaves the green mist that the mines leave as well. So at this point, you might have to redeploy some of your damage dealers and supports. And then at around 1 minute 30, Mod B will initiate another DPS check, very similar to the one before. So now let's discuss a little bit more in depth on the unit choices for Mod B. Like I said in the overview, Strikers are really good on this side. Chifuyu, the Twins, Admin Sword Fighter, Lee Suyon, etc. Although not Esterosa, because Esterosa has a buff on the other side. You can also consider using Awaken Yuna or Awaken Mina. Mina is probably better. Take note that Yuna's Fire Aura, her damage over time aura, does not work on bosses. Arachne and Titan are buffed via the combat environment. I haven't tested it myself because I don't have them built, but I think it's worth considering since they're buffed. Then we get to sports. Lin Xian is probably the one that comes to mind the most. She needs CDR gear and a little bit of tankiness so that you can actually get her ultimate off. And you also need a healer because the green mist deals damage over time. Evelyn is probably the top choice here because she has the highest sustained healing. An honorable mention goes out to Terminator. It's an SSR that's not talked about a lot because it's not used on other modes. But here it's a defense shred and it's also a striker, so that's also worth considering. And lastly, I'd like to say that the Rangers are better on this side than on the other side. On the other side, they have roll disadvantage, so if you're going to use any Rangers, use them here. So then, let us move on to Tyrant Sword. Tyrant Sword is a striker boss that slowly moves towards your ship. Tyrant Sword will stop if there is a unit within melee range, at which point it will attack it. Tyrant Sword has fairly high attack, and its attack also apply a debuff that deals HP % burn and also reduces incoming healing, and it stacks. Tyrant Sword also summons these air minions constantly, so you also have to deal with air units. Tyrant Sword's special skill is a giant AoE in the front, and if it happens to kill a unit, the cooldown is refreshed. And its ultimate is this giant AoE in front of it. This needs to be redirected to the back in order for it not to wipe your entire squad. And finally, on certain HP thresholds, it will spawn a sword near your ship and then drag any units it comes across all the way to the far side of the stage. So as you can see, it's a fairly involved fight. There's a lot of things to take note of. So firstly, let's discuss the tanks. In the C server, we have units that have an immortality buff, but in the global server, we don't have any units with that yet. So the best we have is Admin Shieldman and Estarossa. Admin Shieldman because one of its passive is anti-striker damage resistance, and Estarossa because she has a buff via the combat environment. Since the boss has a debuff that reduces incoming healing, using healers to sustain your tanks isn't recommended. As for damage dealers, as I said before, the snipers, Shaolin and Karen are the best ones for this job. And if you also have Sigma, she will help a lot because she buffs their roll advantage, and she also summons an additional tank to sort of stopgap in between dropping your actual tanks. As for dealing with the sword drag, Jushiun is the most common answer for it. I suggest you look at the elimination score and wait for this text to pop up, and that's when you drop Jushiun. Now, the sword drag happens at 70%, 50%, and 30%, so it's possible that it'll happen 3 times. So sometimes you won't have an answer for the second and the third activation of the sword drag, so at that point, you'll have to redeploy your DPSs. And finally, as for redirecting the ultimate, the most common unit for this job is Ingrid, a 2-cost striker that can be dropped anywhere. Now, let me show you the setup that I used on the C server Tyrant Sword fight. So here I drop Sigma and Karen near the edge of the ship, and I let Karen do her special skill in order to tank a bit before I deploy Estarossa. This makes it so that Tyrant Sword is closer, so it's much easier to deploy Ingrid behind it to redirect the ultimate later. Only then do I deploy Shaolin. In this fight, I have the resource deployment debuff from the high intensity plan, so if you can drop Shaolin earlier, then feel free to do so. So yeah, that's most of the fight. There aren't really phases to the fight, it's just a lot of things that you need to take care of. And at this point, it's all about knowing the timings and just getting used to them. Okay, that was the video. I hope that this helped you in your Danger Close escapades. Hopefully it was informative. I do have my references in the description. Also, if I think of anything else, I will put them down in a pinned comment below. And yeah, thank you for watching.